Hey everyone, I'm PRXBT, and today we're going to be talking about ranges in 9.18. So I got two accounts in Challenger, and in today's guide or video, we're going to be talking about ranges and how they've changed from my previous video I made, which talked about the Korean ranges. And if you're not familiar with that, you could check out the video, which I'm going to link in the description below. Probably a good idea to know about it, even though a lot of things have changed since then, and that's definitely a bit of an outdated guide. So let's get into the current meta and how ranges fit into it. So before we get into the video, let's talk about why I decided to call it Korean Ranges before, and now I'm not calling it Korean Ranges anymore. Well, the reason for that is because back when I made the video and the guide in 9.16 or the end of 9.15, ranges were actually considered very weak by both NA and EU. However, if you're looking at the Korean streamers in the Korean meta, Koreans were the only major region other than China. I don't pay attention to China, but from EU, NA, and Korea, Koreans were the only ones who were using ranges a lot, and in 9.16 at that specific period in time. And it was actually the most contested build, or one of the most contested builds, even in the Brawler and Nobles meta, which the Koreans were also using Brawlers and Nobles at the time. So it was a very specific build that had exactly 7 units. They did obviously have some variations, and a lot of EU players and NA players did use rangers, but they used them with like 4 knights or with some guardians or with 4 glacials or something, and they'd use different items. But however, this was a very specific build that, yeah, a few people in EU and NA were using, but it was in Korea, it was like the meta build that everyone was using basically, and it involved having a GA plus Morelos on one of the frontliners, involving a Sejuani or Aatrox, and either a Static Shiv or an Ionic Spark, preferably both, focusing on the synergy for Phantom and getting someone really low at the start of the fight, using the AoE and splash damage to finish that unit off, and then the Rangers would whittle everyone else down after that. Um, so that being said, Aatrox was very rarely used as a ranger component in NA or EU ranger comps, whereas in Korea, Aatrox was like a key unit, basically. So that's basically why I called it the Korean Rangers, and after I made that video, actually, the Rangers started to gain huge popularity again in EU and NA, and yeah, they started to see a lot of play again, and then there was a lot of changes to ranges and everything else, which had to change the way ranges were played, basically. So, due to balance changes, that specific Korean ranges build isn't really that viable anymore, and it's definitely, I'd say, outdated now. So you need to. So that's why I'm making this update to the guide, since a lot of people have come to me and have asked me to update that video. So I'm going to do that today, and we're going to talk about how to play ranges now in 9.18, where every major region has been playing them, not just Korea. Everywhere they are being played, and everybody considers ranges very strong. And there's a lot of different ways to play them now. They're very versatile, very flexible. But this is the old Korean ranges build, but things are different now. So let's get into it. So what has changed since 9.16? Couple of big things are the Ginsu's Rage Blade and the Ranger's attack speed buff. This means that Rangers can actually be played less of just as supporting acts to the frontline and to the Phantom, but they can be played more as actual carries, and you can itemize them as carries more so that they can do more damage and kill everything more by themselves without needing like a strong front line, but by using just themselves as the carries and having the front line support them more rather than the other way around. And it kind of also makes the other synergies such as Phantom or the other items such as Ionic Spark and Static Shiv less useful than before. Another thing that changed is that there's much less hex tech and much less brawlers. So the old build was actually pretty good against brawlers and hex tech, and you could position and spread out in a way that allowed for that. However, right now there's a rise of void assassins and shapeshifters, and so we need to change our item set, and we probably need to change who we put around our rangers to support them in order to make up for that change. So we'll talk about some of these adaptations we can do in future slides. So there's also been some changes to leveling, experience, and gold. It won't actually change too much about how the game for rangers plays, but it did bring in, let's say, void assassins and make them more powerful since they have more time to reroll, stuff like that. Rangers are still very strong, and it's just that you want to play them differently than you used to. It means that rangers can be played more as rangers rather than supporting the Phantom and the front line like you used to before. And right now, there are a lot of different ways that you can make very strong ranger builds. So you need to be very flexible, and you can go in multiple different directions depending on what the game gives you and what you want to counter, basically. Okay, let's talk about what are some early signals that you may want to go with rangers. So one of the biggest early signals is that you pick up an early Ashe. And why is an early Ashe so important? It's because she's going to be your core carry. She's the one who's going to be holding all of your items, and regardless of whether you're going a 4 ranger or a 2 ranger build, Ashe is going to be a key component in it, and so you need to 2-star her as soon as you possibly can, and getting an early Ashe is one of the best ways to guarantee that you're going to 2-star her very early, possibly even be able to 3-star her. And right now with the new item drops, you can even drop an Ashe from the items. That can be a signal to go into Ashe, or you can just pick up Ashe, before the Krugs or something. That's always going to be a huge, big sign that this could be a good Rangers game. A second signal is you don't pick up an early Ashe, but let's say you pick up a lot of surrounding units that you can build around Ashe, right? So you pick up Mordekaiser, you get Mordekaiser 2, or you got Vayne 2. So Mordekaiser 2 is one of the key knights you want because he's going to be allowing you to get Phantom buff later if you pick up Kindred. Vayne 2 is obviously the 1-star, the 1-cost ranger who you want to be picking up early in case you want to go with 4 rangers. And Varus, you can pick up a Varus or 2, or even get an upgraded Varus. It's another early ranger you could use. So these are all early units you might want to be looking for when going for a Rangers comp, basically. In terms of itemization, you're probably looking for a Rageblade start now more than anything else. Guinsoo's Rageblade will be the key item, unlike Static Shiv before. We'll get into itemization a bit later, but basically Guinsoo's Rageblade is just key item on Ashe now because it got buffed a lot and the ranger's attack speed got buffed. So those two things together make Guinsoo's Rageblade basically a must-have item onto Ashe now. And then for other items, you probably want either a cloak or a spatula or both. The reason for this is because cloak will be built into either Runon's Hurricane or an on-hit item such as Hush or Curse Blade, basically. And these are some early signals you want to go ranges. Now, obviously, if you get all of these things going to you, then the game is basically screaming to you like, please go ranges, dude. But that's not always going to happen. You're not going to have all of these things aligned perfectly. So, you just want to stack components on top of each other. So maybe you don't have uh, Vayne 2 and a Varus, but you do have Mordekaiser 2, and you picked up an early Ashe, and you got a Rageblade start. So, that's already a good enough signal that you want to be thinking about ranges. You want to keep it in the back of your mind, but you could definitely keep things open-minded for the future. But you could, if you don't know what else to do, you could also just hard commit to ranges. There's very many ways to be flexible with ranges later in this guide, as we're gonna see. So as I mentioned, static shiv is no longer necessary. Why is it that static shiv is no longer necessary? It's just that it didn't really get nerfed recently. It got nerfed a while ago, but recently there hasn't been any nerfs. It's just that other things have gotten buffed, making static shiv weaker in general, and Ginsu's Rageblade is just too important. So now static shiv is basically only used if you want to win streak early in the game. So if you're having a strong early game and you want to win streak and build upon that early game, build momentum, so that in the late game you can use your health, let's say, as a resource, and you're going to be able to lose some health in order to make more economy and change your team composition in the late game. That's one of the reasons to build static shiv in the early game. If you want to be able to win streak and build a lot of momentum basically going into the mid game, that would be pretty much the only situation when I'd be building a static shiv now, and I would do that for any comp. I wouldn't build a static shiv unless I was win streaking, and if I'm win streaking, then you can build a static shiv with pretty much any comp, because it's a really good item in the early game. However, it really falls off hard the later the game goes on. So just keep that in mind. And we already talked about Ginsu's Rageblade, and it is a core item. So the secondary item is preferably going to be a Runon's Hurricane. Otherwise, you could always get a second Ginsu's Rageblade. That's gonna make your attack super fast. But Runon's Hurricane is really good because you're gonna spread your attacks out, and Ashe has the Glacial proc. So Runon's Hurricane plus Glacial right now is really super good. You're going to be freezing lots of enemies at the same time. In addition to that, you probably want to be adding another on-hit disabling item onto them, such as Hush or Curse Blade. So you're going to have Glacial plus Hush or Curse Blade. That's a really nutty combination with Runon's Hurricane or double Ginsu's. But if you can't get one of those two extra items, you could always build a defensive item like Dragon's Claw against magic damage, or Phantom Dancer versus assassins. The third item would preferably be an on-hit disabling item such as Hush or Curse Blade, as we already talked about. Okay, so let's talk about some pivotal and key units. These aren't actually units you need to pick up, but you should highly consider picking them up when you're going for ranges, and they're going to be enabling some synergies that you want to look out for as the game progresses, and they're going to be key units you're looking for specific ranger team compositions, basically. So be on the lookout for these units when you go ranges, basically. So Kindred obviously is actually a ranger, and Kindred is the hardest ranger to find as a 4-cost unit, and she's going to be very important if you want those 4 rangers, or if you want Phantom, or both. Brand is, again, a hard unit to find, and 4-cost unit, and he's going to enable Demon Buff and Elementals. Kennen enables Elementals and Yordles. Kennen is a very contested unit. He always is. He's very popular, fits into a ton of team compositions, and so even though he's only a 3-cost unit, he's still hard to find. Sejuani is debatably one of the strongest, powerful frontliners right now. She's got amazing crowd control for ranges and is an amazing frontliner. And she's fits amazingly with ranges because she's both a knight and a glacial. And finally, we got Pantheon or Leona. Again, 4 cost and 5 cost unit. Hard to find, quite contested. Enable Guardians. So these are all like pivotal units that are harder to find, but that you'll need at least one of these basically in the late game to complete any sort of a late game team composition. So be on the lookout for these units when you go ranges. Let's talk a bit about early to mid game gameplay, how you want to roll, how you want to level. Basically, it's very standard, nothing new. In the early game, you're gonna generally not roll very much at all. You're just putting out the strongest team that you can. You're always going to be able to pivot into ranges later. If you don't have upgraded ranges, you can just keep them on your bench. So that will be round 2 in these first few rounds. You may want to level up to 4 in one of these first few rounds. Depends how your econ is, how many upgraded units you have, or if you want to get some pairs upgraded, you may want to just keep econing and not level. It all depends on the game, and you may want to level to 5 2 rounds after the first carousel now, but you don't need to. You can keep econing if you're loose streaking and you're weak. You can keep econing and just build a big econ so that you have a lot of money to roll down after the Krugs, basically. In general, after the Krugs, that's the round when you want to level up to 6. And so right after the Krugs, you're going to be level 6 in general. And between these 3 rounds after the Krugs, that's when you want to like roll down and try to hit your units. You want to roll down and try and hit a 2-star Ashe, 2-star Varus, something like that. So that's why it's so beneficial to be finding at least 1 or 2 Ashes before the Krugs. Like if you find an Ashe before then, that's amazing. Otherwise, you're gonna have to like make a transition after the Krugs in round 3 when, let's say, the mid game starts. This is a round where you want to start rolling down and you want to look for some upgrades. And then if you're strong, no more need to roll. You can just use that strong team composition you've got out on the field, and you can just use it to keep econing up to level 7, which will generally last until right around the wolves. But if you're weak, then you just roll down to 0 until you have a team that can stay strong. And you keep rolling until you're at the carousel. You don't usually keep rolling after the carousel because you usually want to econ up so you can level on time. You want to level the round right after the wolves. In general, you know, everything can change game by game, but that's how it generally goes. And then at level 7, you wanna get some sort of a team comp stabilized and get a team comp together during these rounds. And then if you're doing very well and if you're rich, you're going to level up to 8 after the Raptors, but sometimes that's just not going to happen because you're not having a very good game. But yeah, I hope that kind of helped the early leveling. So now let's get into the final team compositions that you can go to. Firstly, the old Korean Rangers setup is still perfectly viable. Only difference is you might be using different items now, and you definitely want to shift out of this team comp as the game goes on. You're more likely to get to level 8 now, so you may want to get to level 8 and then remove Aatrox, put in 4 Knights, for example, or you could put in 4 glacials instead with, let's say, Braum and another glacial such as Lysandra. This is 4 ranges plus 4 knights. It's one of the more common variations of the 4 ranges build, and very strong. It gives you a lot more tankiness, and ranges really need a front. 4 ranges plus Guardians plus 2 knights plus Phantom here. Again, gives you a lot of frontline and involves 4 ranges. Very good. I won't spend too much time talking about these because I want to keep the video as short as possible, and also it's pretty basic. I'll go into when to go with which composition later in the video. This here would be 4 ranges plus 4 glacials. This is actually probably one of the strongest variations in this meta. Really enjoy this, especially if you got good items on Ashe, obviously. You got a good mix of items. Okay, so let's move on to some two ranger. Actually, no, this is a 4 ranger variation. So this would be 4 ranges plus 3 elementals. Important thing with this is, again, with this variation, you would probably be looking just to use this as a, let's say, early to mid-game power spike at level 7. And then at level 8, you might want to, let's say, switch into something else, such as maybe 4 glacials. So you could get rid of Cannon and add Braum, and get rid of Cannon and put in Sejuani. Transfer Lissandra's items onto Sedge or something. So you don't want to stick on 3 elementals forever in most. That being said, elementals are definitely in a very good spot right now. Okay, so now let's move on to 2 ranger variations. This would be 2 rangers, 4 demons, and 3 elementals at level 7. It's, again, very early mid-game power spike focused, and it's very powerful. With this at level 8, one thing you may think about doing is, let's say, again, adding in 4 glacials. So you could put in Braum for Cannon and add a Sejuani, and you got 4 glacials, 4 demons, and 2 rangers. Good frontline, decent attack. Your carries will be Ashe and Brand in this situation, but you've got some frontliners you can have as pseudo carries as well here. This is another 2 ranger variation. It's going to have 2 rangers, Phantom, Elementals, and 4 glacials. At level 7, it requires Anivia, but basically you see with these comps, you're kind of just mixing and matching. There's a few key components you need, but otherwise you're kind of like looking for the units you need, and we'll talk about when you want to go into which comp. This will be the last 2 ranger composition I'm showing here. It's 2 rangers, 3 elementals, and 3 yordles. Yordles are actually really strong in this meta. Gnar is one of the strongest champions in the game, and yordles do well in a meta with assassins and a lot of auto attackers like other rangers. So this isn't so common, but I've played this and it's been a lot more powerful than I first thought it would be. So that's going to be a few of the examples of team compositions that you can use, and probably some of them are more common than others. But basically you want to mix and match, and you want to, like, the whole point of this and the whole point of playing ranges is that you can be so flexible, and the only real key component you need is that Ashe too, right? And then you kind of just bring in everything else. You kind of got all these other components like a Kindred or a Brand or Sejuani, and you bring those components in and you create your team around those units, and you can also build specific teams to counter other teams, basically. So you want to pick up good units and build your team around those good units, basically. So the real question you need to be asking, and this is what separates the best players from the rest of the pack, basically, is how to decide which comp to go, when to go which comp, and so that's all going to depend on what units you're given, as well as what you want to counter. So in a lot of games, you're going to be struggling for health, and you're going to be really low on health, so you just need to get some kind of team composition together as soon as possible. So you just pick up any units you can, and you just make a team composition. However, in some other games, you're going to be having a very good game. You're going to be on a lot of health. You're going to have a good economy. And in those situations, in order to win a game, you need to look around the lobby. You need to scout and you need to decide based on the rest of the lobby, what should I go for here? In those situations when you're not strong and you just create a team comp as soon as you can and you just pick up the units, you're not aiming to win. You can't win if you're like low on health and you just need to put something together. You're aiming to top 4. Luckily enough, Rangers are actually a very reliable team comp. They're very consistent. They're very good at top 4ing. It's just hard to win with Rangers. How do you win with Rangers? You need to have a good start, good mid game. You need to be very healthy, and you really need to counter other teams. Like countering and scouting in the late game and being flexible is what's key to actually winning with Rangers, basically. So you're looking around the lobby, and let's say that you see a lot of assassins, then elementals will be really good in that situation. Cannon is just extremely good against assassins. Lissandra as well. Even Brand is good with his ultimate. It's gonna like bounce off everyone, and assassins are quite squishy. So as long as your elementals get an ultimate off, that's gonna be really good against assassins. However, its elementals are also just good in general, especially if you cannot find Kindred. One of the most obvious things you can do is just go into some 2-ranger elemental type of team comp, and it's going to give you a good mid game that you can transition out of into the late game, as we saw at level 8 maybe. If you see some people with a lot of magic damage or some like really big crowd control units like a Cho'Gath or Sejuani, then you might want to be thinking about going with 4 knights. And the reason for that is that 4 knights just blocks any type of damage at all. So that includes magic damage. But also, knights just allow you to spread your units out. You don't need to be clumped up like you do with guardians. And that means that you can like position your Ashe in a place where she's guaranteed not to get hit by crowd control, or a place where she's guaranteed not to get hit by like Brand ult or Linsol ult or something like that. Glacials are going to be very good against shapeshifters because it's going to prevent shapeshifters from transforming, and it's even if they do transform, it's going to freeze them and prevent shapeshifters from doing their damage. So glacials are definitely one of the best solutions versus shapeshifters, especially if you got an Ashe with a Hush or Curse Blade on her. It's going to be so good. It's also very good against Draven comps because Draven is one of the best carries in the game. However, if you've got 4 glacials, the chance of freezing him are very high, and it means that in those situations where Draven would often be left 1v5ing, he can't do that against rangers because the glacial procs will just freeze him and allowing the rangers to win that final fight. And in this current meta, since shapeshifters are so powerful, having a team comp of rangers with 4 glacials is, I think, one of the strongest. So I'd say it's a good default option to go to if you just didn't scout or something like that. So I definitely would give a thumbs up to the 4 glacial. Guardians are probably some of the best units you can include versus physical damage, such as gunslingers, or such as even a Draven comp, or even assassins, although against Void Assassins, that's really not too true. But Guardians are definitely good against stuff like gunslingers. And Guardians also have a lot of crowd control with Pantheon or Leona. Especially Pantheon is really powerful. If you don't have somebody with a Morello's, you can just put in Pantheon instead now, and he's basically got the Morello's debuff, which is kind of ridiculous. But yeah, those are situations when I'd look to put in Guardians. Yordles would probably be best against assassins or auto attacks based champions such as gunslingers or other ranger players. They probably won't be that great against Draven comps since, Draven has an RFC, but Yordles are just powerful in general, but against Assassins they're good because Cannon plus Gnar, very strong against Assassins, and again, versus auto attackers such as Rangers or Gunslingers, um, they're going to be dodging attacks, so Yordles are also a very good option to go for in this current meta. Okay guys, that's going to be it for my video today. I know it was a bit longer because there's just a lot to go through. I couldn't really make it shorter without cutting the video into several sections. But a lot of people did come to me and ask for an update since the old Korean Rangers build is kind of outdated. So I just decided to make this in order to show you all the different ways to go with Rangers now and just show how flexible they are and the things you need to be thinking about when you're going for Rangers. So I really hope it helped you guys. And thanks for watching. If you're liking my stuff, then give me a like and a subscribe. And make sure to follow me on my social media and check me out on my Twitch stream, www.twitch.tv/PierreXPT. Have a good day, everyone.